The Quest of St. Nicholas continued. Chapter 7. The Fisher King. After many days of travel, the reindeer and the great stag with the glowing cross between its antlers brought the sleigh to a stop at the top of a hill overlooking a great valley. A river still flowed through it, apparently not yet frozen, despite the many days of bitter cold. Yet even more extraordinary was the great castle in the middle of the valley. It was an ornate stone structure built right over the top of the river, so that the river flowed right through the great archway at the base of the castle. The castle bore many towers and ramparts, and was unlike any structure Nicholas had ever seen. "Behold the castle Corbenic," said Prudy. "Some call it the Castle Adventurous, for it is a place of many wondrous adventures," exclaimed Fort, with a glint of excitement in his eyes. "Yes, Fort, but we are only stopping at this place briefly, for our wondrous adventures lie elsewhere," replied Temps, in an attempt to calm Fort's excitement. "Ah, look, the Fisher King," said Spez, who, being the archer, had the best vision of them all, and could see at great and far-off distances. They all looked to where she was pointing, and they saw an elderly man in a small boat, paddling on the river through the castle's archway. "Come, let us go and meet him," said Carrie. They descended the steep slopes of the valley, coming up to the banks of the river. The Fisher King paddled up to them, and smiled through his long white beard, waved to them with a greeting. "Hail to ye, 7 servants of the Moon Maiden, and hail to ye, good Nicholas, servant of the incarnate light, committed to the quest of the Christkindle, as given to you by his mother, the Theotokos." He spoke with an accented voice, a thick brogue. "You know me?" Nicholas asked, astounded, beginning to think that perhaps he should stop being surprised by these wondrous encounters. "Of course I know ye. I have been told of your quest by some of your elven companions here. These 7 are good friends, and well known here at Castle Corbenic. Few can find their way here without the aid of these companions. Now come, step into my boat, and I will take ye to the holy relic for which you seek." Nicholas and the 7 elves climbed into the boat. It was not more than a large canoe, which usually could only seat 4 or 5 full-grown men, but due to the elves' small stature, they were all able to pile in. The Fisher King kneeled at one end of the canoe, and Nicholas sat facing him at the other end, with the 7 elves crowded in between them. Each end of the canoe curved up into an ornate swirling woodwork. Emblazoned on the side of the canoe was a symbol of a leaping fish crossed with a spear. Between the curve of the leaping fish and the spear was the image of a chalice with a small cross above it. Nicholas noted that the same image was on the mantle of the Fisher King. After some pondering about the meaning of this image, he was about to ask the Fisher King when he was distracted by the marvelous beauty of the great castle to which now they drew close. The Fisher King paddled the boat right under the great archway through which the river flowed. The tunnel inside was well lit with many torches on the beautifully carved pillars, which blossomed out into the vaulted ceiling like a forest canopy carved of stone. Carved between the archways, formed by the pillars, were illustrations that Nicholas recognized as scenes from the Holy Scriptures, and others he did not recognize. Great battles, men and women in prayer, figures doing works of mercy, angelic figures, and many more. Lower down along the wall were depicted even more scenes, though in ornate tapestries and paintings rather than stone carvings. Noticing Nicholas's wide-eyed wonderment, the Fisher King said, "The scenes you see here depict the work of the light in the world throughout history, both events from the past and, according to your time, events that are yet to be." "My time?" Event yet to be? The Fisher King smiled at Nicholas's quizzical look. Castle Corbenic moves through time and space differently than you do. This place, in a way, is in a way outside of time. It was founded by St. Joseph of Arimathea as a place to keep important holy relics and spiritual treasures, to be safeguarded until needed by various men and women throughout the ages. That is, men and women who serve the one true King, the incarnate light, and who are on the quest for his kingdom, such as you yourself, Nicholas. Nicholas, still full of questions, was about to say more, but it was just then that the canoe pulled up to the stone walkway, where a group of attendants waited for them. On their clothing was the same crest of the leaping fish crossed with the spear around the chalice, though more simple and less ornate than that which was on the mantle of the Fisher King. The attendants steadied the boat and helped pull the Fisher King up to land. He leaned heavily on his attendants until one of them handed him a crutch. It then became apparent to Nicholas that the Fisher King had a lame leg. As Nicholas and the elves climbed out of the boat, the Fisher King continued his explanation. The Fisher Kings are the line of guardians established by Joseph of Arimathea, specifically to oversee and safeguard the Castle Corbenic. But one of the burdens we bear as Fisher King is the mystical wound which we receive when we take the office of Fisher King, a chronic wound in the leg. It is to humble us, reminding us of our own unworthiness of the office, and to remind us of our own failures and sinfulness, and those of kings to come. They then walked through a set of wooden doors carved with the fish and spear symbol. What does that symbol mean? Said Nicholas. The one of the fish and the spear and the cup? Does it have to do with your title, the Fisher King? And what is the meaning of that title anyways? The Fisher King smiled as he hobbled along next to Nicholas down the marbled hallway, followed by the elves and attendants. You have many questions, Nicholas. Your mind is always pondering great wonders. That is what has led you to be such a great bishop. Your mind is always seeking to delve into the great wonders and mystery of the divine. That's why you have been such a zealous defender of the mystery of the Incarnation. Yes, I know much about you, Nicholas, about the Council of Nicaea that you attended, about your life as a bishop, and about your deep love and devotion to the beautiful season of Christmas, where we celebrate the Incarnation. How I know all these things about you, it is too much for me to tell ye now. But suffice it to say that the Castle Corbenic is a place of great wonder and knowledge that reveals many hidden things and secrets, many of which are made known to us, keepers of the castle. But my predecessors and my successors are called the Fisher King for two reasons. First of all, because the king called fishermen to be his first apostles, and told them that he would make them fishers of men. But second, it is a reminder of the mystical wound that we bear. As we are made lame by this mystical wound, we are not fit, as many kings are, for great battles or hunts or the like. Thus much of our time in keeping of the castle is spent sitting in contemplation of great mysteries of this mystical place. And as I cannot walk well, much of that time is also spent out on my small boat in this wonderful river, fishing. For the fish and other goods of this river, over which our castle is built, is our main sustenance. And what a wondrous life it is! What men would give to be able to spend so much of their days fishing and dwelling in a place as marvelous as this, he said with a smile and a wink. As the Fisher King talked, Nicholas noticed many rooms and stairways that branched off this great marble hallway, and many more tapestries, paintings, statues, and carvings that are more than I could tell. And a great many rooms, some filled with ancient books, others with beautiful treasures, relics, and weapons. Judging from the rooms Nicholas saw off this hallway alone, he realized that one could spend decades here and still not fully taken all the incredible wisdom and treasures stored here. The long hallway ended in a large round room, obviously one of the towers. It looked to be a very homely room, especially in comparison with the majestic stone and marble hallway. This room, while still ornate, had lush carpet, comfortable-looking chairs, and a large ornate fireplace. It was lined with tall windows, making the room feel extra welcoming after the long and beautiful, though windowless hallway. At the opposite side of the round room was another set of arched doors, emblazoned with the same fish and spear symbol. They went across the room towards the doors, where the Fisher King halted. Leaning on his crutch, he pointed with his free hand to each part of the symbol. As for the leaping fish, I have already explained it to you. The fish is the symbol of the Lord's first apostles, the call to be fishers of men, and a reference to the mystical wound that we kings of this castle bear, that we spend much time fishing. It also refers to a pre-Christian legend that comes from these northern lands, of a great hero named Finn McCool, who caught the salmon of wisdom and knowledge, a metaphor for all who live here, as that is something we seek to grow in. This is a place of learning and contemplation. As for the other two symbols, in the center is the Holy Grail, the cup from the Lord's Last Supper, which had also caught the blood and water that flowed from his side at his crucifixion. The other symbol, the spear, is the spear that pierced the very side of our Lord after his sacrificial death on the cross. It is the spear of the Roman soldier named Longinus. These are the two relics St. Joseph of Arimathea bore with him as he traveled here to these northern lands. He then founded an order of kings who came to be known as the Fisher Kings, to be entrusted with the protection and guardianship of these first two holy relics. This castle has thus also become the place to keep for various other holy relics, some from your lifetime and some from other times, and times yet to come. This mystical mansion has thus become a sort of crossroads between realms, of different times and places, and between the earthly and the spiritual realm. And it is for one of these first two relics, he said, pointing on the spear, that you have been sent to us, Nicholas. Without another word, he pushed the door open, revealing a short walkway, lined with windows. Two of the attendants helped the Fisher King down to his knees, and they knelt on each side of him. Realizing the other attendants and the elves also all knelt, Nicholas followed suit. They then reverently walked on their knees down the short hallway to the doors at the other end. The Fisher King, with the help of his two attendants, led the way, pulling himself with his one good knee, while his other leg dragged limply behind. The attendants, still on their knees, pushed open the more simple wooden doors at the other end of the hallway, revealing a small but beautiful chapel. It was lit by dozens of candles, whose lights flickered on the ornate stonework and woodwork and reflected off the gilded icons. The muted sunlight cast a vast array of colors through the stained glass windows. At the front of the chapel was a decorative high altar, with a larger-than-life image of the crucified king in the center. Just beneath the image of the Christ crucified was a glass case, built right into the high altar. Its edges were made of swirling woodwork, and the inside was lit so that its contents could be clearly seen, though Nicholas could not determine the light's source. But across velvet pillows and backed by brocade fabric with gold tassels lay a spear and a cup. The attendants and the elves around Nicholas halted at the back part of the chapel, and only the Fisher King, with the help of his two attendants, continued all the way up to the high altar. The Fisher King paused at each of the 3 steps up into the sanctuary. At first, Nicholas thought it was because the Fisher King needed to rest at each step. But he then noticed the silent movement of the Fisher King's lips, murmuring a silent prayer at each step. Once he was up the few steps, the Fisher King and the attendants then lowered themselves down, laying face down upon the floor, and remained there for some time. Finally, they came up again, and the Fisher King, using the shoulders of his kneeling attendants, pushed himself to his feet. Leaning on the altar, he reached up, opened the case, and drew out the spear. He turned and silently held up the spear. In response, all the Fisher King's attendants and the elves all fell prostrate. Nicholas again followed suit. The small group rose up again to their knees, and the Fisher King, now using the spear as his crutch, hobbled down the aisle right up to the kneeling Nicholas. For all the reverence and prayerful quiet they had shown in obtaining the spear, and for all the ornate beauty of the chapel, the spear was itself actually quite simple and unadorned. A simple, straight wooden spear with a metal spearhead. The wood close to the head bore a slightly more reddish hue than the rest of the staff, but otherwise there was nothing noteworthy about the spear. That is, until Nicholas noticed the edge of the blade that glinted with red, as if a red liquid were dripping down the edge of the blade. But he woke from his musings as the Fisher King extended the blade toward Nicholas and touched it to each of his shoulders. And the Fisher King said, as he dubbed him, "Nicholas, I dub thee the Santa Nicolaus, for you must continue to strive and struggle for the sanctity demanded by all who bear this sacred spear. None are worthy, but are only made worthy by the blood and water that flows from the side of Christ the King, drawn forth by this very spear. But you, already living as a servant of this Savior King, who is the incarnate light, the Word made flesh, who shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. So now you shall be a knight of the incarnate light. By the might of the magnificent majesty of the mystery of Christmas, of Christ the King's coming into the world, of which the hosts of heaven heralded, and with harmonious hymns hailed his coming, with great songs of Gloria, arise now, Santa Nicolaus, knight of the Christkindl, commissioned to a great quest for the Christkindl, to conquer the Krampus. For that is the name of the gathering demonic darkness that you must defeat. The crooked and cruel creature of demonic darkness that seeks to steal hope and joy from the world, to infect the hearts of all, but especially of children, with the cold darkness of the prince of this world, who seeks only to destroy. But by the King, and by the guidance of his mother, the holy Theotokos, by the empowerment of the 7 virtues, and by the fire of the incarnate light, you are now to be a ferocious force against the foe, to dominate the darkness. Rise now, knight of the Christkindl." Nicholas raised his head and arose, taking the sacred spear which the Fisher King had offered to him. As he did so, he recalled the third of the 4 words offered to him by the Moon Maiden. The third word, a spear. To battle the darkness, you must obtain the holy spear of St. Longinus, the very spear that pierced the side of the king at his sacrifice. After receiving the spear, the Fisher King and his attendants led them back out across the river to the edge of the valley, where their sleigh was waiting. They also restocked their sleigh with more food supplies for their journey. The moon seemed brighter than usual, as if the Moon Maiden herself was smiling down upon them. The moonlight glistened off the snow and the frosted tree branches. And as Nicholas mounted and stood in his sleigh to give his final thanks and farewell, what a sight he was in that moment. Spear in one hand, wreath of holly encircling his other arm, his great red cloak flowing about him, and his great white beard flowing down his breast, glistening like the snow about him, illuminated by the light from the glowing cross between the antlers of the stag. Santa Nicolaus, as the Fisher King had dubbed him, stood like a glowing crimson warrior, like the knight of the Chriskindle that he had been christened to be, like a thing out of legends, ready to rage against the forces of darkness. His eyes burned with a new vigor and focus as he knew his mission. The Fisher King and all his attendants themselves, awestruck by such a sight, then knelt and asked for a blessing from the good Bishop Nicholas. After receiving the blessing, they rose. The Fisher King said, "This sacred spear, Saint Nicolaus, shall serve as the bishop's crook, your walking stick, and your weapon against evil. It has been soaked in the precious blood of Christ. Embedded into the shaft, just beneath the spearhead, is a sliver of the true cross, upon which Christ the King was crucified. Go now on your quest. Defeat the darkness and save the children." "But where am I to go to find this Krampus, this demonic beast that I am to defeat?" Nicholas asked. The Fisher King pointed to a particular star in the sky. "Continue north. Follow that star. Polaris is its name, and it will lead you to where you need to go. And besides, the stag with the beaming cross between its antlers will not lead your sleigh astray."